The world is at a crossroad facing rising uncertainties and global challenges. Some people are put into poverty, while some others keep gaining unlimited wealth. Some countries gained flag independence, but still living under new colonialism. They don't have control over their own resources, economy, finance, or even foreign policy. Some countries are locked at the global value chain because some unfair system designed putting them at the bottom. We have so many global challenges to tackle. But somehow, China escaped the trap, rose from a war-torn country to now a very successful economy in the world, with rising global influence. So many people from different countries are looking at China thinking, ouch, maybe there are some experience we can borrow. So they want to understand China. They come to China like, today I'm attending the World Socialism Forum. So to help you understand today's China, I invited a very influential figure. He's a writer, historian. He's the director of Continental Institute for Social Research, John Wick. John, so good to meet you again in China. I think you come to China more often than a lot of people.
Well, I really like being in China, so I'm happy to be here. It's a great atmosphere. It's a beautiful country. I mean, just in terms of the geography of China, it's gorgeous. And then what people have done for their society, it's pretty amazing to be here to experience the sense of personal security that people feel. Makes me happy, you know, so I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
I mean, it's always such a great pleasure to meet you and speak to you. And I really want to ask you this question because I have a lot of following from people who believe in socialism and communism, people who are leftists from around the world. I always see they are discussing this very important topic on behalf of the leftist people who believe in socialism and communism. Let me ask you this question. Do you think China is still a socialist country?
It's a really important question. I mean, the easy answer is that China is in a very important process to build socialism. There's two reasons why I'm answering like this and not in a yes-no fashion. One, it's interesting that almost all revolutions that took place, from the revolution in October of 1917 in the Tsarist Empire to the Chinese Revolution to the Cuban Revolution, all revolutions took place in really poor peasant societies. They didn't take place in a rich society with advanced capitalism where you could immediately socialize the means of production or pretty quickly socialize, you know, the wealth and build a very rich and a society that Marx called a society in the realm of freedom. These are countries that were in the realm of necessity. So they had to really struggle to build a socialist process. I mean, in China, for instance, at the end of World War II, which was such a long war, over 25 million people dead, agriculture largely destroyed, all of this had to be rebuilt. So to say, in 1949, Comrade Mao, have you created socialism? He would laugh at you. After all, they named the country the People's Republic of China, not the Socialist Republic. They understood it was a long journey. That's the first reason why I say this. It's a poor country struggling to build its wealth in a socialist process. But the second reason why I don't say yes, no, etc. is, in fact, socialism is not like a light switch. You have the lights off, it's capitalism. You put the lights on, it's socialism. Socialism is always a protracted process, a difficult process. You have to change the hearts and minds of people. You have to build the infrastructure in a very complicated way. And in China, certainly, because of the role of the Communist Party of China, which actually prevents the creation of a capitalist class. In China, you have capitalists, but you don't have a capitalist class. They are not allowed to create their media. They are not allowed to control political parties. They're not allowed to buy off the election system. They don't operate as a class. They exist as capitalists. And that's because of the political role of the Communist Party of China. So because of that political role of the Communist Party of China, this is certainly a socialist country in a process to build socialism.
And also you mentioned something, because a lot of people on social networks bring this issue up, is China has capitalists, or there are no homeless people in China, and China has skyscrapers like big metropolitans like Shanghai. So it looks so well developed and rich. Hence, China is not a socialist country. This is the narrative I saw by a lot of people who say they are socialists, who say they are leftists from different countries. What do you make of that comments, and what would you say to them?
Neither socialism nor capitalism are described by buildings. The existence of buildings in a city doesn't make the city either capitalist or socialist. That's a trivial way. Yes, this is an advanced society with modern structures, buildings, trains, and so on. Very modern structures, beautiful, well-made roads. But this is not by itself a reason why you categorize a country in one way or the other. The way you categorize a country is based on who is owning what. And you've got to look at something like the fact that society has abolished poverty. Frankly, if a capitalist society, if the United States abolishes poverty, I would say, well done. Then I would say capitalism is capable of abolishing poverty. But in fact, they are not capable of abolishing poverty because the rich in the United States control politics and they prevent policies to be enacted that allow for hunger, illiteracy, poverty to be transcended. Now, it's very interesting that the places in the world which have transcended poverty, hunger, homelessness, etc., seem to be pursuing a socialist path. China is one of them. The state of Kerala in India has just overcome absolute poverty. It's a state run by a left democratic front government. It's not a capitalist process. Vietnam, for instance, very close to abolishing poverty, hunger, and so on, happens to be led by a workers' initiative, workers' party, and so on, the Communist Party in Vietnam. So, if capitalism could overcome hunger and homelessness and poverty, I would salute it. But it hasn't been able to do that. It's not the buildings, it's the belly. Don't look at the buildings, look at the belly.
There's a lot of discussions in the world because China's influence on the world stage is rising day by day. So a lot of people are concerned or worried that China will become imperialist country. So let me ask you this question. Are you worried that China will be the next hegemon in the world?
Not at all. And the reason I don't worry, let me put it this way. China is a very big country. It has 1.4, 1.5 billion people. It takes up a lot of space in Asia. It is surrounded by much smaller countries. And obviously smaller countries that are next to a big country feel a little anxious. What's going on and so on. I understand that's the case with all small countries and big countries. That has nothing to do with communism, socialism, capitalism. It has to do with the size of the country. That's a normal situation for countries to feel uneasy. But I don't think that China has ambitions to become a superpower. I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is it's made no move to build, for instance, a military capacity that's offensive. Largely, China's military capacity is to defend itself from an attack by the United States and its allies. It's the United States that has built 900 foreign military bases, including many bases around China. China is not interested in building military bases in the Caribbean to threaten the United States and so on. I just don't think that China is committed to anything other than multilateralism. It's made it very clear in public statements from President Xi Jinping and others. They are committed to the UN Charter, the United Nations Charter. They are committed to multilateralism. I take them at their word. They're not building a military for world conquest. And with a continent like Africa, they have said, we are interested in industrializing Africa. We are not just interested in extracting raw materials. I think all of this is evidence, at least for now, that China is definitely not interested in world domination. This is not a game of risk.
That's why I think recently Trump said his meeting with the Chinese leader is a G2. And for us, I think we don't believe the description as G2, because G2 implies there are two superpowers dominating the world. Feels like the US is ready to share the dominance with another power, but that's at least from what I understand from reading all the government officials' documents, policies, and China shows no interest to dominate the world. China has no interest to be imperialist. And is actually boosting, if you read the speech that Chinese president gave at multiple international conferences, either the recent APEC summit in Korea or other big conferences, it always says we need to build we need to protect the multilateral international trading system. We need to boost multilateralism in the world. So I don't know whether you agree with this point, because from my point of view as a Chinese, China is boosting this multilateralism to make sure every country, whether big or small, you have a fair say on the international stage.
Well, look, firstly, for many years, China was not really interested in joining the global South countries in a bloc. You know, when the global South countries in the 1960s created the Group of 77 in the United Nations, China didn't join the G77. It used to vote with the G77. We used to call that G77 plus C. You know, it was always plus C. In 2009, after the global credit crisis, the big financial meltdown, China actually joined a process which was BRICS. There's a C in BRICS. It's not BRIS plus C. It actually joined the BRICS, a very interesting development, and China has been increasingly talking about itself as a member of the Global South. I find this interesting. I also found the development, the maturing of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The SCO starts as a group in Asia worried about the Taliban. This was in the 1990s. It was a security body. It has matured where they are now thinking of building a development platform, perhaps even some sort of funding mechanisms inside the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and so on. The CO BRICS and so on are indicators that China is interested in rooting itself in the global South. It wants better relations with India. This makes me feel very, very optimistic if China and India can improve relations rooted in the global South. It's inappropriate to use the term G2 because the G2 means that there are only two players in the world, the United States and China. And by the way, I wonder how the Europeans feel about that, because you know, there used to be this thing called the G7 where they were a part of it. Trump didn't say G7 plus C or G8 with China perhaps joining the G7. No, he just said loosely G2. I think it's inappropriate. I think, in fact, we are G193. It's the United Nations. That's what counts. And I think China's rooting itself in the global South, saying that it is a developing country and so on, is a very important indicator of the leadership role China has to play alongside India, Brazil, other countries, you know, South Africa for the global South inside the United Nations. I think I feel very happy seeing that recent years, a lot of people from global South are coming to China either as tourists or either as students or working in China. I see rising number of people from Latin America, Africa, Arab world coming to China. So it feels, and I do hear a lot of them saying, you know, China's development is a miracle. There is so much that we can observe and maybe learn one thing or few. Maybe we can adapt it in our country to help our people get out of poverty. Can you give us a perspective for the global South? So what China has done can be adapted to the global South countries. I've been very interested in this question of what can the global South learn from China and how can the global South partner with China to do various things. Because of that, in our institute, Tiao Continental, we started a collaboration with the Chinese journal Wenhezhong Hen, and we built an international or global South edition where we have Chinese scholars write in English, Spanish, Portuguese and other languages, is explaining how, for instance, China built high-speed rail. You know, what was the process? What was the procedure? How did China build such an impressive, let's say, battery system, electric energy system and so on? We want practical articles. We want to learn what are the debates and discussions inside China, because the issue isn't you know, that you take a Chinese train and start running it in Africa. No, it's how can the African countries build their own train systems? How can Latin American countries develop their own electric car process? It's not just about, you know, having Chinese companies come to Latin America and build the car. That's not the way. It's about how we can get other countries to develop the confidence and the theories and the practical application of building a modern society which is equitable and socialist in their own continents. I think that's the key lesson of China. China didn't borrow from the United States or borrow from Germany. Yes, there was technology and science transfer from Germany, from Japan, from France, from other countries. But then China developed its own science and tech sector, building its own capacity. We want to learn the same. We want to learn how we can do it, and I think that's a fundamental lesson. But at the heart of this lesson is the issue of socialism. It wasn't just that, China had good engineers and scientists and 1.5 billion people. It's that you had a communist party that was planning, thinking ahead, that marshaled the resources in a proper way, and that figured out how to use the market mechanism for the social good. Obviously there are inequalities in any society. We're not going to leapfrog over inequality. The question is, how do you control inequality and prevent inequality from just becoming the system itself? I don't believe inequality defines the Chinese system. I think it's there, but it's not the definition. I think socialism defines the Chinese system. Inequality has to be managed, has to be lessened, its edges have to be blunted, but it's not the defining feature of the Chinese system. And actually, Chinese government is very clear about the inequality that exists in our society, and that's the next biggest task we have to tackle. That's why we have the recently we just have the 15th five-year plan. What are we going to do in the next 5 years? And the government report is focusing on, we have inequalities between people, but also between regions. So we need to move more resources to, say, northwest China, the west of China, to make sure they just recently were lifted out of extreme poverty, and we need to boost them to catch up with the eastern part. So, just the dedication of dealing with inequality and to expand the middle class, reduce the super rich class, and to raise the living standards of the empowered is a commitment of the Chinese government. Like, we know this issue. It exists. We acknowledge it exists in our society, and we must finish it or tackle it. I think maybe that's one of the differences compared to some other governments. There are some problems that will have to be dealt with. For instance, yes, it's absolutely correct. For the last 15 or 20 years, the Chinese government has been pretty focused on regional disparities. And it's interesting that when Huenta and others started to talk about go west, we've got to integrate Xinjiang into the rest of the country's economic prosperity, got to bring Tibet into the rest of the prosperity. It's at that point that suddenly the West discovered in Jiang and said, oh, there are problems. The timing has always struck me as very interesting. Okay, all of that is true, but there are going to be some problems that China will face. For instance, as you grow a middle class, you have to also make sure that you don't enter into what is an aspirational crisis where middle-class families start to say, look, we don't want our children to do certain jobs. And then you have a problem that where certain jobs are seen as below you, and you don't want it to happen, and then you have to bring in migrants to replace your own population. This is what happened in capitalist societies where the middle class started to grow, and then natives of that country said, we don't want to clean buildings, we don't want to pick strawberries, and let's just bring in migrants to do that. You have to create a sense of the vitality of labor to pay jobs that are seen as not so prestigious to treat them with respect and dignity. That's got to be the role of the Communist Party, to make sure that people don't say, look, people who clean buildings, that's a lower form of work. We are a middle-class family. We don't want our children to do that. You have to change that attitude, but also you're moving in a direction where there is much more mechanization in society. A lot of things are happening by machine, but there has to be a real focused attention on not allowing this idea of the migrant taking over the low form of work. This becomes a problem even within a country where people migrating from rural areas are the first stage of a certain low form of, low paid work, low respect work, and so on. This has to be tackled politically, otherwise you face a problem. And related to this is, as a middle class grows, its aspirations become endless, and aspirations have to be managed culturally. This is why red culture is very important, not only in Chinese society, but in any socialist country. It's very important that people study Marxism, that the whole culture understand that the point of human life isn't just to keep wanting commodities, but the point of human life is to generalize happiness. to live in a happy society. I mean, an amazing part about Chinese society already is that in places I've been to, I have never felt worried for my personal security. And I've never felt my soul hurt by seeing a homeless person on the street, somebody begging, hungry, and so on. You just don't see that anymore. That is actually a social victory. I think that needs to be celebrated in the culture. I think people don't understand the importance of what they have achieved. I think they take it for granted, and that becomes dangerous. When you start taking that for granted and you don't understand the enormous cultural victory you've made, you start to think, well, it's normal now, I want more, that has to be confronted. But that's a political fight. Let's talk about Global South. So I remember at the Global South conference, many Global South people asking this question because China and all the Global South countries share this same history. We were all colonized, we went through humiliation. But how come China rose from the ashes, rose from a colonized country to an independent country with very powerful economic and global influence? So how come China rose from colonization and humiliation, but many countries in the Global South still haven't? What's the difference? Well, one of the great differences is China had a revolution. There was the Chinese Revolution of 1949, and China was able to defend its revolution. Other places had massive changes. Indonesia, Sukarno led a process. It was moving in a direction of the left. It wasn't a revolution like in China, but it was a considerable process. He hosted the Bandung Conference in 1955. 10 years later, he suffered a coup d'etat. 1 million communists were killed in Indonesia in just a matter of weeks. They were not able to defend what they had done. See, in 1949, when China had a revolution, the Chinese leadership was very clear. We better quickly learn to defend ourselves. You know, we have a Red Army, but we need to learn to defend ourselves. What did they have to do? I don't think, Zhou and Lie and Mutung and others were so excited to have a nuclear bomb. I don't think they felt, let's go nuclear. No, they had to do it. They were under pressure. If we don't have a shield to protect the Chinese Revolution, they will overthrow us. When the revolution took place in the Tsarist Empire 1917, all the imperialist countries attacked the so-young Soviet Republic. Similarly, in China, there was a great worry. There were armies being backed by the imperialists in Burma to attack China from the south. There was military support given to the province of Taiwan and so on. There was a war, an active, dangerous war in Korea, which the Chinese had to go and defend. All of this was an indicator that they were going to attack the Chinese Revolution. China was able to defend its revolution. That's important. There's a very big difference between overcoming colonialism and creating an independent government, what Frantz Fanon called a flag republic. You're flying your flag and actually being able to exercise your independence. Look, let's face it, the Communist Party of China played an important role. Mahatung played an enormous role in that. They were able to defend their revolution. By 1978, the reforms of 1978, when Deng Xiaoping moves a different agenda, they don't disband the Communist Party. In 1992, after the Soviet Union collapsed, they didn't collapse the People's Republic of China. They defended it. This is an enormous achievement, and I think people in China should be proud of it. People in the Global South need to recognize that it's not just economic development, it's about political power.
What can lead Global South countries to have a revolution? I just share my 2 cents, my observations, because I have a fan base that make up by a lot of people who believe in socialism, communism, from different countries. I feel the leftist people in the world are very divided in a way. They disagree with each other. How can we unite them all?
Well, they always say that, you can either hang separately or you can fight together. Yeah. That's one of the sort of axioms of politics, but I think it's a very complicated issue. We have to go to the history of the left in an earlier period. China is a good example, the United Front policy. The Kandang and the Communist Party had enormous clash in 1927, the murder of communists and so on, and yet they created a united front. Yet the Red Army was converted into the 8th Route Army of the United Front. They were in Yunnan. They were fighting up there in the north. They were fighting alongside the Kindang against the Japanese. That is a sign of political maturity. The understanding that sometimes you have to set aside your differences and fight together against imperialism. I think the first lesson for the left globally is to develop both a united front attitude, very important to join with other people when you have to, but also clarify your own principles. Remember in the 1930s, in the late 1930s, during the United Front period, it's not that the Communist Party of China said we are no longer the Communist Party. They made it very clear to General Asimo Changai that we differ with you on all these things. We are not the same, but we will fight together against the Japanese. You have to have your principles, but you have to unite with people against the greater enemy. And I think that doesn't happen. The culture or the habit of uniting is not very well developed. People are very sectarian. They want to sit on their principles rather than understand the dialectic of being principled and uniting at the same time. It's a unity of opposites. Sometimes that's dialectics. You got to maintain your principles, but you unite with people. Unite with them on the basis of your principles. Look, in most parts of the global south, people are suffering and they are detached from the left because the left in many countries doesn't have a mass line. The left has its principles and sits here and is not able to throw itself into the people. Once you develop a mass line, you develop a project of being close to the working class, peasantry, oppressed sections, precarious workers, and so on. You will be forced into a united front. And the reason is that the people are themselves not necessarily sectarian. They want to overcome hunger. They want to overcome despair. They don't want to be, there are 700,000 people a year die of things like loneliness. This is disgraceful. We have to be out there making them feel useful, that the world can be a better place and so on. For that, you need your principles, but you need the united front.
Thank you so much, John. It's always such a great pleasure to talk to you. I enjoy your speeches, and you give such powerful speeches everywhere you go. Well, I need to learn from you, right? No, you listen, let's not do this, but I would want to say you are terrific. You're doing such a good job explaining to people outside China about what China is, the complexities. People have a cartoon understanding of China that they say things like China is this, China is that. I always say to them, it is 1.5 billion people, 100 million people in the Communist Party of China. There are great differences. You can't meet one person in China and believe that's all of China. That's racist. You got to understand its complexities. Welcome to the fact that China is a place of human beings, and human beings are complicated. They are flawed, but they're trying to build something profound. And you are a good representative of that. Thank you, guys. You hear that, right? Yes. Listen to John. Subscribe to my channels. Thank you. But of course, I really welcome everybody just to come to China, either as a tourist, either to study, to work, just to talk to people from different provinces, different ethnic groups, talk to the super privileged Chinese, but also talk to the people maybe still living the villages to understand the complex. So, John, it's so good to talk to you, too.